Israel is an independent country. Is it? No?
Yes.
Is there an independent? Is there an independent country? Are there independent countries in this world?
No. Not really.
Okay. Now you're answering the Buddhist way. You're right. Like ordinarily we would say America, the United States, is an independent country. Israel is an independent country. Tibet is not. Why? Because in relation to certain aspects, the fact that they can self-govern, Mexico or Canada is not telling the American president how he decides this is that. In relation to that, we say it's an independent country. Of course, there's nothing truly independent, but we can still use that language. And conventionally. For instance, we say, let's look at the situation objectively. Right? We do that. What does that mean? What does that mean? Let's look at the situation objectively. It doesn't mean we take away the mind, and without a mind, we look at it. That would be bizarre. It means without having strong emotions being involved, being part of the process, so leaving aside those emotions, we look at the situation. That's what it means, right? So we're borrowing these words from everyday language. Okay? So independent, of course, in everyday language, we're not saying America is not dependent on the oxygen that moves through Mexico or whatever. I mean, that would be bizarre. It's dependent on many factors. Politically, economically, what else? Naturally, biologically, physically. I mean, it's dependent on many things. But independently in relation to one thing or another. Objectively in relation to this, that, and the other. When we say wetness is natural to water, that's okay, we can still say that. It's not like, oh, you're a Buddhist, you're not allowed to say that. It's not, that's not what we mean. Of course, it is inherent, it's natural. You see the dependence of water being wet versus water being warm, it's not the same. Okay? Conventionally there's a difference. So we can still say it's natural for the mind to be loving, or natural for the mind to, we say certain things about the mind, or to perceive its object. That's natural. It's inherent, that's how we use the word. But here we're talking about something specific. So impermanence is inherent to the table. That means it doesn't depend on anything to be existent, to exist. Now the question is that true? The impermanence of the table, is that inherent to the table in the sense it doesn't depend on anything, it just is? Would you agree? No. What does it depend on? What does the impermanence of the table depend upon for it to exist, besides imputation?
Space.
Causes and conditions.
Space. Causes and conditions. Very good. You need causes and conditions. Without certain causes that give rise to the next moment of a table, that wouldn't be possible. What else does it depend on? Parts. What are those parts?
The light, the surface.
The part, but even each individual moment of the table, right? For something to change, you need individual moments. To have movement, for instance, movements of legs, you need each sub-second of these moments. So none of those moments are movement in themselves, but based on all of them, we talk about walking. Likewise with change, individual moments, you need the individual moments, which are not the impermanence. It's based on those individual moments and in dependence on causes and conditions that change can take place. And when that takes place, we call it impermanent. So, it's not something that just is inherent, independent of anything else. No, it's dependent on many, many, many objects. And in dependence on these objects, we label impermanence. That's why it is merely labeled, it doesn't exist in here. Okay? But it's still something that goes along with the table. You couldn't have a table that's not impermanent. But that in itself is not enough to say it's naturally or inherently impermanent.
It makes sense to me when you phrase it, it's inherently dependent on, let's say, causes and conditions. Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
What I don't understand is, when I realize, understand subtle impermanence, changing moment to moment, what do I don't get it in order to realize at the same moment emptiness? What does it mean? Of course, it's not inherently, permanently there if it changes moment to moment. But I'm not having emptiness yet, so they say, because I have to meditate on it for another year. So, but I do have, what is it that I miss? How can I perceive it inherently if I realize that it changes at the level? Moment to moment, nothing is there permanently, nothing is there, so how can it be from its own side?
So how come you haven't realized impermanent? How come you haven't realized
What is the
emptiness
difference
yet?
between?
In other words.
Why do I still have to?
Okay, this is very interesting. Reminds me of one of my teachers in Geshe, who's been here 3 years. He said it in a different way. He said, well, people say, well, the table, it's not this leg, it's not that leg, you know, so there's no table, big deal. That's emptiness. I understand emptiness. No, that's very coarse. That's just a coarse version of saying, well, the table is not this part and not that part. This is only introducing us to the idea, right? And we need to dig deeper. But this is like, how do we know? Her example is not talking about the parts of the table. It's not, that's not the table, that's not the table, that's not the table. That is just a coarse version of emptiness. Really it is. It is one of the reasonings that take us to emptiness. But if you just understand the table is none of its parts, well, it's not the same, not different. It's just you can't find that table. That's still very coarse. In fact, one of my other teachers, again to the Kelsang, what he always says is, when you don't find the table, just not finding the table, not even that is emptiness. Not even that is emptiness. So the non-findability of the table is not enough, because once you don't find it, you need to arise from that state of mind. You need to let that go and combine it now with the way it does exist, with its lack of inherent, with its interdependence. When you understand the two in combination, as Lama Konsang says, there's no contradiction between appearance and emptiness. That's when you really grasp it. Okay? Now, with the other part you mentioned about this changeability, it's not this, it's not that. You have understood that there's nothing solidly there, but you haven't combined the two yet. It's a table only because. And furthermore, it's not just that you cannot find the table as being a table, but have you gotten to the point where you believe you don't need anything intrinsic within the object to make it a table? Not just that there's no table to be found, but no intrinsic nature whatsoever is needed for it to be a table. Right? Not even its parts. As long as you believe its parts are inherently this, that, and the other, well, then you're still left with holding on to a part of it that exists inherently. So it's like the table cannot be found, but its parts exist inherently. Then you still didn't go further enough, far enough, right? So the bits and pieces that it's made of, if you believe its changeability, it's inherent in the table, well, you still don't understand the table fully as totally lacking inherent existence, including its parts, including its characteristics. This is why what this text is doing here, it keeps saying, if that widget, if it doesn't exist inherently, but its parts exist inherently, you're still stuck with inherent existence. You need to understand that it cannot exist inherently because that which it is made of doesn't exist inherently. So there's no inherent existence. You see, our mind likes to hold on to something there. It's very dissatisfied if you take everything away, which is why I love this Tantrika school, in the sense that they so beautifully reflect this idea that although they can say, like the Prasangika, yeah, we just call it a table, but there is something there. We call it a table, so they're not stupid, they agree. They say, yeah, because we call it a table, it is a table. But there must be something within that table that is different from this board, and and they're not just talking about the basis of imputation, there's something coming from the side of the object. Because otherwise, we could call that table. It would be a table. Okay? So it's a little bit like also what Shuki kind of addressed to a certain degree, where there must be something there, because otherwise we could call anything. This is the Svatantrika. The Svatantrika school basically says that yes, you need a mind. Without appearing to a mind, it couldn't be this, that, and the other. But there's also something from the side of the object. Both, you need both. From the Prasangika school point of view, that's inconsistent. Why do you need a mind? It already has that little thing there. So, to summarize, that this is not a table, in the sense you can't find that table, that's not enough. There's still a sense there's something there that distinguishes its atoms from the atoms of something else. Am I making sense? Otherwise, you could call anything. That sense of there must be still something there. The sense of dissatisfaction, if you take it apart and you never find anything, right? To be satisfied and say, okay, I don't find anything, and it's merely labeled. If then you feel like, well, then I can call anything, you end up being the Svatantrika person. So you need to really check, what is your reaction? Do you feel this is impossible? And also in terms of your everyday interactions with people. Because it's not enough when you just have a coarse sense of, yeah, it cannot be found. But then every time, if you really understood this, then you wouldn't have a sense, I'm over here and you're over there. Our afflictive emotions could not be as strong as they usually are, if you really understood it. So another way to check, have I understood it or not, is to go back to your emotional response in certain situations. Is there a sense, I've really been wronged? This other person is wrong and I'm right. This person's got some evil. In every situation to really check, because if that is still there, then it's just a very coarse version. Am I making sense? But it's very hard for me to say exactly what you're missing, because I'm not really sure what you've understood in that moment, just in dependence on your description.
Just a small addition. Would it be good to say, that a person cannot fully understand impermanence? I mean, to a very high level degree, yes, until he's realized emptiness?
No, that's not correct. It's not that, but there's something to it. So her question is, in order to understand impermanence on its subtlest level, do you understand emptiness first? No. No, it's not absolutely necessary. Because a subtle impermanence it's easier to understand subtle impermanence.
To realize and understand.
Pardon?
To realize and to understand.
Realize and understand, here I'm using them interchangeably, as in like incontrovertibly know. So realize, I think, maybe better. So to incontrovertibly know that things change moment by moment, you don't need to realize emptiness for that. It would help greatly, but actually it's said to be the other way around, as in like realizing subtle impermanence is extremely helpful to realizing emptiness. So it's recommended to first, and it's easier to understand subtle impermanence, so to first understand that. If you really understand subtle impermanence, and I'm not just saying intellectually, but you feel it, in whatever you think of, you can't think of it without considering the fact that it's never the same from moment to moment. Right now, the table and its impermanence are totally different things. Right? Yes, I think of its impermanence, I understand it, but when I think of the table, there's no sense of an impermanent table. So you really understood the impermanence of the table, that when you think of the table, you cannot help it but think of its characteristic of it changing all the time. For instance, right now, if you think of a table as being blue, right? For you, a table is blue, and every time you think of a table, a blue table appears, right? In the same way, if you really understood its impermanence, the moment you think of a table, you have to think of a table that changes moment by moment. But that doesn't happen. Which means your Your impermanence is here, and the table is over there. Right? So that is a little bit like when you understand, like when you think of emptiness of the table. We'd say form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not, what is it? Form is not other than emptiness. This is saying they're inseparably linked. The emptiness of the table and the table are inseparably linked. In order to understand that, it's a little bit like the gold and a gold coin. Right? If you think of the gold coin, you need to think of the gold. You can't link that. You can't have a gold coin or the hummus. You have to think of chickpeas, like whatever it's like. So to really understand hummus, you need to understand chickpeas, which is easy. Gold coin and gold is easy. But to really understand the table and its emptiness, you cannot separate them. When you think of the table, you think of it in the back of your mind. There is like it doesn't exist inherently. It's not like emptiness is over here and the table is over there. That's what we usually do. We think about emptiness, but that's not the table I usually think of. In that moment, it becomes the emptiness of something else. If I really incontrovertibly realize the emptiness of the table, then to me, the moment the table appears, it's not like simultaneously. There's a second where I go, it lacks inherent existence. I go back to the table, it lacks inherent existence. So I go back and forth because I have the whole package now. Am I making sense? Same with a person, same with myself. I can actually, in a meditative state, understand, oh, can't find the self, can't find the self. Then I arise and I think of inherent I, inherent I, inherent I. Right? So there's the non-inherent I of my meditation and the inherent I that's the center of the universe. Right? So if my meditation, if it's become effective, that's when I think of I as a non-inherent I. And that's big. From that onwards, I'm the center of the universe. How are you going to have that? Right? So there is still some natural tendency every now and then when just naturally, innately it arises. But the moment you're mindful, it just cannot arise. Mina, did you have?
Yes, I want to comment and I want to make sure I understand. So if I look at the table there and I look at what is known as a chair there.
Yes.
And I decide that this chair is now a table.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
That is the concept. So if I look at an object and all of a sudden I come over to you and I sit on that table and it becomes a chair, is that the emptiness? The flexibility of the sentient object to change according to its function?
Oh, right. Okay. Well, you can do that with a table and a chair, but you can't really do that with a pencil and a chair, right?
But I can do that with BB and King Jingle, you know,
But you can't do it with BB and a pencil. Alright? You see, the thing is like, it's not like everything becomes possible. That is the other extreme. Right? So everything becomes possible. It's just because it's not inherent in BB, this, that, and the other, it doesn't mean it's conventionally not true.
I understand. But if I compare BB to Trump,
Okay.
then BB all of a sudden becomes wonderful.
Okay, there you go. BB's not inherently horrible because in relation to Trump, he's a little angel.
Is that the emptiness? The ability to...
Well, okay. Okay, all right. We're kind of getting there, but that's just not enough. So, is there some intrinsic goodness in BB? Intrinsic badness? Intrinsic prime ministerness? Anything you say about BB, is it intrinsic in him? Can it be found? If it cannot be found, you're getting there. And then how does it exist? So, like I said, this takes a really long time, so don't be frustrated. You're getting there, you're moving in the right direction. But just from what you've said, there's a bit of a tendency, is anything possible? No, you've gone a little bit too far.
I didn't say the table is a bird.
No, you didn't say that, but you said the
You
table
know, I
is
can
a chair.
throw it in the air and it will fly for a couple of seconds.
Okay, alright. So what about BB and Trump? Alright. So comparing those two, in relation to my only point is saying that emptiness is more like is something intrinsic within BB, something that is anything. If you say no, there's nothing that can be found because it's only a relation, then you're getting there. That's it. So yes, with the chair and the table, if that's what you mean, in relation to, it is a table in relation to A, B, and C. But there's nothing intrinsic within it because I can use it as a baby bed, I can use it as a chair, etc. Yes, so in that case, but it doesn't always work. I cannot use it as water to do my laundry, okay? Because here, the basis of imputation, it doesn't allow for that to be labeled as water. As long as I keep defining water in the way I do conventionally, it does not turn into water. If it were inherently a table, I could not use it as a chair. That is true. But just because it lacks inherent existence, I cannot do my laundry with it. Okay. So, now I need to be careful about the time. Can someone, what time do I close? 12, yes, 12 o'clock. Please remind me 5 minutes before that. I still want to do a meditation, but I'm still trying to get to the bit. So I apologize, I'm always having that problem. Anyway, verse 14, saying that in terms of our mistaken appearance, if something is not permanent, it doesn't mean it's automatically inherently impermanent. That's clear. Then 15, also, in order for anything such as holding on to something, here, very, very important, the relationship, you need three things usually for any activity to take place. You need an agent, an object, and an activity. Those three, very important. Agent, object, activity. Think of the mind. To understand your mind better, your mind is an agent that has an object which it does something with. You want to know what the mind is? The mind does something. The most basic thing it does is it perceives. It is aware, okay, of an object. So you need an object, you have an agent, object, agent, and activity. This is how I sometimes explain the mind. People say, like, what is the mind? What is it? It's as simple as that. It is that which is labeled on the basis of doing something with an object. Okay, that's the mind. So that's the agent. And for an error to take place, in order for here, the ignorance, for instance, what does ignorance do? It holds on to something that doesn't exist. That's it. It perceives, it is aware, it grasps. But actually, every mind grasps. My eye consciousness grasps at a table in the sense of, like, it holds on to a table. And it's a correct consciousness because a table exists. If it grasps at an inherent table, okay, then it's a wrong consciousness. But my eye consciousness doesn't do that. My eye consciousness, it just perceives table, that's it. But my mental consciousness, okay, it also may perceive just table, and then it's a correct mind, which table exists. So if it exists conventionally, it exists. However, when it grasps at an inherently existent table, then I call it a wrong consciousness because it is an agent that perceives something which doesn't exist. It doesn't exist, but to that mind, because it holds on to it, it perceives it to exist. Therefore, I describe that to be a wrong consciousness. But is it a mistaken mind in and of itself? No, because it depends on an object, on an activity, right? So it's an agent that is only mistaken, not inherently mistaken, but in relation to an object and a perceiver. And then an object, does it exist or not? Well, existing or not, it's dependent on a mind that perceives it. Okay? Without a mind that perceives it, for instance, blue. Does blue exist? Yes. Blue is an object. Yes. But it only exists because there's a mind that perceives it. Because science has basically established it that blue doesn't exist out there. So blue does exist, but in relation to a mind, and a mind that perceives it. So, the philosophical question, if there's a tree in a forest that falls and no one is there to perceive it, does it make a sound? From a Buddhist point of view, no, because there's no tree. Because there's no tree. If there's no one to perceive it, a tree has shape and color. Right? There's no colorless tree. So if you don't have color, you don't have a tree. And color is totally subjective. We must have consciousness that perceives color. Brown, yellow, green, etc. Okay?
Yeah, actually just something to clarify on that analogy.
Yes.
Well, he doesn't make a sound and he doesn't have a color, but he doesn't need light waves and he makes changes in the air pressure around it. So
But then it's again, you see, this is where physics falls short. They kind of say, you need air waves, you need pressure, light waves, you need pressure waves. So physics is kind of telling us there is this objective world, where these light waves, pressure waves, etc. But blue, that exists only subjectively. Buddhists go even further, they say even light waves, even pressure waves, they're also merely labeled, independent of other things. So with that in mind, that labels, you couldn't have them. So even in this forest, you see, science suggests objectivity. In fact, when science came into existence like 400 years ago, there was this view, we want to understand objective reality. Bizarre, now science is moving away from it. But like, not understanding objective measuring, well, who measures? The mind. Light waves, pressure waves. It's because there's a mind that perceives them that are there. So scientists like 400 years ago, they were under the impression there's just this objective world. They called it the God's view. Yeah, we only have a limited view, but we want to understand God's view, which was just another way of saying an objective view. And slowly science has moved away from it, understanding that without a mind that does the measuring, that does the weighing, right? It's totally subjective. And quantum physics, this is why as long as the Dalai Lama always mentions quantum physics, basically goes as far as you can't have anything unless you have an observer, right? Subtle atoms, etc., they exist because there's an observer. That's why every Tibetan, however old they are, they can say quantum physics. You can be 80 years old, they can all say quantum physics, because his illness speaks about them a lot. So, therefore, quantum physics, in quantum physics, for instance, definitely totally subjective. So going back to that, if the tree is made of atoms and they need an observer, well, if the smallest building blocks, atoms, or you could go smaller quarks and what have you, but if they need an observer, well, without anyone observing the tree in the forest, there cannot be a tree because there are atoms and therefore no tree.
but there is something there.
Ah, there's something there. Very good.
Someone is there.
There's something there. That's exactly how I feel. How I feel, right? I'm not saying I'm feeling it correctly. It feels that way. Very good. You just got in touch with that sense. But there must be something there. Yes.
I don't think that there must be. You set an example, then it is there. Something
No,
is there.
I can say BB on my table. Just because I say that, it doesn't mean there's any atom of BB on my table. Just because I say so. Right? So, just because I gave the example, I say if there's a tree in a forest that falls and no one perceives it, I said there is no tree in the first place. That's an impossibility. That's like saying I'm washing myself with dry water. Because conventionally, water is wet. Even conventionally, a tree must be labeled. So it couldn't have a tree in the first place. I'm saying this philosophical question where you assume there's a tree that doesn't make a sound, that's impossible. So from a Buddhist point of view, such a tree cannot exist. That would be like saying it's a non-labeled tree.
Does it exist in there? Is there?
Pardon?
Is there exist in there?
Of what? There's no one there. There's no perception. So in other words, it's just another way of saying no one perceives it. Can anything exist without a mind perceiving it? From a Buddhist point of view, even the Svatantika says impossible.
Next day you come and you see the falling tree.
Next day you come, you see the full tree.
What's the result today?
Well, you're saying to see it, I have to see it. For it to be there, I have to see it. Yes, you see the fallen tree, but now you